welcome back to the Fantasy Rugby Draft podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, and joining me in the booth is the man primarily made of moss, Nathan Mossman. How are you?
This is a podcast about rankings, right?
It is about rankings, yes.
Yeah. I guess the question on everybody's lips will be then, given that a whole off-season and a season last season to adjust to the competition, Nick Sanchez, 1 or 2? Yeah, that's right. It's going to be one of those. It's going to be one of those podcasts.
One or two in hearts and our minds.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, gloves are off.
I see the direction you're going. In today's podcast, we are indeed going to talk about the player rankings. We're going to have a bit of a chat about some updates and players as well. But I thought I'd start with a bit of a pat on the back for both of us, Nathan. It appears we're in mid-season form.
Explain.
Our explanation of the Chiefs Hurricanes playoff fixtures confused. So, as I say, we're in a rich vein of form. We like to cloud issues as opposed to bring some clarity to it, and we've certainly done that with the Fantasy Rugby Draft playoffs fixtures. So, what we thought we'd do is we got our infographic guy who we've got on retainer. He knocked out something for us. It's sitting on Twitter. It's sitting in the How to Play. And it's sitting in a few other various bits and pieces as well. But to try and have another stab at it, so Sanzar in its infinite wisdom.
I can't wait for this. This is going to be good.
Sanzar in its infinite wisdom has decided to put a whole bunch of teams on bye in game week 16. So the Highlanders, Crusaders, Blues, Sharks, Lions and Cheetahs are all on bye in game week 16. During game week 15, which is about a month and a bit long because of the Lions tour, it's put the game 16 week of the Hurricanes Chiefs into game week 15. So that essentially for the period of the game week 15, there's 2 Hurricanes Chiefs matches each. So we couldn't play that in the game week 15, so we've removed it. So all other teams play the maximum amount apart from the Chiefs and Hurricanes. They play one game less. But as I said, that's probably a hash of it as well. Best to check out the How to Play or the infographic that we've got attached to our Facebook and Twitter.
So you take the number of balls bowled by the number of balls placed.
That's right. Yeah, the infographic guy's last name is Lewis. Just a quick reminder also, we sent out an email earlier in the week about our Refer a Friend competition. So all you have to do is create a league and invite someone new to Fantasy Rugby Draft. If they register, then you'll go in the draw to win a Super Rugby jersey of your choice, which is pretty sweet bit of stash. What would you go for, Nathan, considering you've already got a Chiefs one?
So you're asking me who my number 2 team is?
That would be yes. Yep.
No, actually, I'd go for the Jaguares jersey,
just
because I think it looks pretty cool.
The black one with the orange?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's striking, isn't it? I think their alternative strip's quite cool too, actually. It's very nice. All right, let's get into... We've got a lot to get through today, so let's get into the Fantasy Rugby Draft update first.
Fantasy Rugby Draft update.
So the biggest news is concussion-related, Mossman. We were hoping for some clarity on the situation before the start of the season, and we got it this week. The designers of the Force jersey for 2017 have been diagnosed with concussion. You and I have always been pretty strong on pro road safety, but at least try and incorporate it in the design. Have you seen it yet?
No, I haven't. No.
So they just signed a $1.5 million, something like that, deal with Road Safety Western Australia. And it looks like it's a bit of an afterthought about trying to incorporate it into the design. But I think it's one of those viral that I'm convinced it's so bad that it's good kind of designs. It looks a bit like a training jersey, really. But yeah, pray for the Force designers. Of course, I'm probably the bigger news out for most folks out there is Charlie Ngatai. So a bit more news came out about his concussion this week. I don't think it was a massive surprise. I don't think it doesn't sound like it was anything that we didn't really already know, that he has been struggling the long way around. But what are your thoughts on it? Not very encouraging news for himself, mate, and actually for Chiefs fans as well.
Well, the news was that he's not training, hasn't trained yet.
Yeah, he's slowly training. He's working his way back. He's progressing, I think was the thing. But yeah, exactly that.
I mean, and stand by for some world-class commentary, but that's not good.
Yeah, that's right. No, put an asterisk around that one, absolutely. I was chatting to, I can't remember who I was chatting around, but he could be, for fantasy rugby draft purposes, it's going to be an interesting one for him because at some point in the draft, he's going to fall quite a distance because of this news and because of the ongoing kind of cloud over him, where he actually could be value, and it could be Dave Rennie fun and games, and he could actually be playing okay and win you a lot of leagues. So it's at what point that is, though.
Yes and no. I mean, we've still got weeks to go until the start. There's a lot of information that we're going to get between now and then. I mean, if you're drafting now, firstly, you shouldn't be. Probably. We suggest that you don't, for these very reasons. I mean, obviously, if you have to, you have to. But, certainly in our leagues, we try and draft as late as possible. We're going to get a lot more information. I mean, was supposed to be, I think, the captain of the team at the 10. He's been all through with the promotional material, I think. So, okay, fair enough. Like if he's not there, but at least we'll get some insight into, is he training? We'll know something. So I just think at the moment it's kind of no news, and I wouldn't rush to do anything based on what we know right now.
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms, isn't it? The promotional material and the players that they've used. Very amusing. I'm also convinced that the publicity of the non-All Blacks going to the 10s is greater than the publicity of the All Blacks going to the 10s. I suspect they got much more viral content and publicity out of that news as opposed to them actually playing. Anyway, moving on to the next player that probably is, next to Charlie Ngatai, just as pivotal. We had him very, very high at our halfback rankings. In fact, I think I had him number 1. Martin Landaho. So he's out for, 3 months, I think? Was that right? Ankle break somewhere or other, or leg break or something. But yeah, 3 months for him. So that's devastating news for him and for the Hawaris. He was a very pivotal player for them. So one question I had though, do you think that raises or increases the value of TJ Perenara?
Probably not.
No.
I mean, I think he was pretty high anyway.
He was. Pulu's the other guy that probably gets a little bit of a bump up to be that top tier, because I think that's the tier for me, right? So I guess we can get that into a minute. Let's move on. Sean McMahon out injured for, I think they said it, the first kind of month or so. Korobati is another one that people have been probably looking at as a bit of a sleeper in fantasy and where he might come, but just to make a little bit of a to highlight where the Brisbane 10s fit. So I understand he's injured at the moment and out for a while, but he's been named in the squad to go. So I suspect there may have been something else contractually involved there. I guess we'll all know when, you'll know more than anyone else, aren't you? You're heading along.
That's right. Yeah. So you'll hear it here first. Yeah. Except for the fact that you'll see it all over the internet. So
yeah, that's right. I'm very cynical about the way that kind of works and being named in the team. But let's see. The last one that I have, Ashley. So Moroney was also named as injured when Landaho was as well, but he's obviously a lesser known player. But the last one I have was, did you hear about Worcester Warrior news?
Oh yeah, I'm all across the Worcester Warriors. All across that.
So they named a coach, a new coach who took over since our last podcast. Any guesses?
No. Actually, let me think. Is it Mark Hammett?
No, it's not Mark Hammett. It's an ex-South African coach. An ex-South African provincial coach.
Right. No, is this in any way relevant to anything?
Yes. It's very shoehorned.
Just wanted to clarify that, yeah. I mean, if you were telling me that the Sunwolves coach had gone somewhere else 3 weeks before the season, it wouldn't have surprised me.
Yeah, that's true.
Organisation, I think.
Yeah, indeed. No, it's the old Sharks coach.
Philo Tiatia is the coach there anyway, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Anyway. Oh, sorry, what?
The old Sharks coach.
The old Sharks coach. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is this... blanked on them. There was there's Plumtree, right? He used to coach them.
From last season.
Yeah, right. You going to go there or shall I?
You go, mate.
Gary, go.
Indeed. Took over the reins this week, I believe.
Wow, that was a really roundabout way of getting in there.
Had to get it in. Hall of Fame group. So we've set that up because we want folks to be able to find a league if they're looking for a league, to be able to, if you've got a spare space in your league, to be able to fill it up with some active managers as well. So there's a lot of chatter that goes on there about rankings and certain rules and where do you come down on X, Y, and Z. It's evolving, and there's a good core group of folks in there at the moment that are putting some good debates together and obviously formulating some strategy now on rankings and certain players. And we also fish for team news, like we were scratching about for Charlie Ngatai news from anyone who had any information last week, and then the news broke. So jump on the Hall of Fame group. It's really, really handy if you want to kind of mix with a few of the other managers that aren't necessarily in your league.
Yeah, we see the odd person playing in a league with themselves with all auto teams. So stop it. Seriously, really, what are you doing?
That is true.
Barbecuing alone.
Follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rug Draft. That's Fantasy RG Draft. And also drop us a note at support@fantasyrugbydraft.com. We've got lots coming through this time of year. I wanted to share one with you from friend of the podcast, Warwick Austin. So their league, the High Val Bowl, they're not screwing around, these guys. So his email goes, "We've just had a last-minute drama on our side. Our runner-up from 2016 has been removed from the group as he is unable to attend our draft weekend due to commitments to his significant other. He knows the rules, and we not take this lack of commitment to the league lightly. He has been removed and subsequently replaced with his own housemate.
Wow.
This adheres to the Heidfeld Bowl's strict FRD rules of general shenanigans and skullduggery."
There you go. Rules are rules.
That's right. That's tremendous. That is cutthroat. And to his own housemate as well. Every day he has to come home and he's going to be talking about it. Oh dear, that's wonderful. Alright, so we wanted to also have the main purpose or genesis of the podcast was to talk about the rankings. They're up on the site now, so you can go and have a look at the top 200 we've got. But just to kind of take a step back and let you know how we come up with them. So we take in inputs from various folks that we kind of trust or know. You and I then go about creating our own rankings. Before we get into the next thing, actually maybe run through the listeners how you create your rankings, because I know it's quite a detailed process and quite a good process.
Basically, it's just I actually come up with projections for the number of points I'll score. I think a player will score for the coming season, and obviously that's based on what they've done over the last 2 to 3 seasons, depending on if they were in league or not, and how I think their team will go or them personally will go in relation to past scores. So all that kind of stuff. Generally tend not to factor injury proneness in there if I can, because I think we've probably talked about before, I don't think that's true of a lot of players, that they are injury prone. Mm-hmm. I think if you break your leg, you're unlucky. You do a knee, you're unlucky. It's a little bit different. If you're Richard Kahui and you've just got a shoulder that just won't stay in the same place, it's completely different, obviously. Mm-hmm. But as a general rule, I'd say you count on most players playing most games. I think you have to. There's no other, you can't look at it and say, I think he'll be injured for 50% of the games. It just doesn't make sense. So anyway, I take projection, take a benchmark for players in that position, and we can talk later about how work out what that benchmark is, and effectively then just take the benchmark away from the projection to get a value, and that value allows you to rank players from different positions against each other, which is generally the hardest part about this.
That's right.
Because when you're sitting there and you're doing position rankings, it's relatively easy. You either like this guy or you like this guy more,
Yep.
It's only really when you're not comparing apples and apples where things get a bit tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very difficult. I think, as you said, most people can try and dig out some averages, and certainly the eye test and the finger in the air for certain in positional, looking at your fly halves, looking at your outside backs. But when you start to try and compare this outside back with that midfielder, it becomes pretty cloudy. And this, from what I could see, was actually, it looked like a very thorough statistical analysis, and then as any well thought out statistical analysis and robust analysis should be conducted, we then head to the pub and we ran through the rankings, and the site rankings are a result of this. They aren't Mossman, they aren't your rankings, mate, but he has had a strong influence on them as well. So there's a couple of things that we've talked down, or we've adjusted those rankings just to bear this in mind.
Oh, really? Like what?
Like I have moved down 2 players. I moved Bowden Barrett and Richie Mwanga into the back half of the first round.
All right. Okay.
When you and I sat down, I think I had them at 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, not a massive shift, but in terms of percentage shifts, that's a pretty big one in the first round.
Yeah. All right. I just want to put you on the spot there. It's good. Go off script every now and then. It's good.
That's right.
Keeps you on your toes.
Indeed, mate. Indeed. I wrote a number of players down as we were going through our rankings anyway. And I've gone through them, and sometimes I can't actually remember if I'm higher or lower on them than you, because I don't have a copy of. So we'll see how we get on anyway. But if you did want to see how it actually was done, and we put a wee clip together on the site, so you can have a look at that as well. But before we get into those players, there's a division between us, Mossman, and it revolves around the fly half position. Do you want to run through your theory, and I'll go and put the kettle on.
I do and I don't want to run through it in a lot of depth. I think because to say that it's about the fly half position, I think is overly simplistic. Mm-hmm. Because effectively all it's doing is, like I said, is trying to rank players by value against each other. And it just so happens that as a general rule, the fly halves come out ranked lower for me than they do for you. That's not to say that there's something inherently wrong with fly halves, or different, I guess. It's just that's the value. I'm sure there's players in other positions that are probably a lot higher as well. Perhaps not to the same extent, but yeah. I mean, there's some ranks, obviously, I can take you to task over, but we can come to that.
Okay, so moving on from your hatred of fly halves, let's start with the first player then.
Thanks for listening. You got it, yeah.
Just summing up for the listeners, just summarising, paraphrasing, I think they call it.
Yeah. No, we don't let facts get in the way of things. We live in a post-truth world.
Oh, don't let me get into alternative facts. I've got that up my sleeve for later. All right, the first one that I thought was interesting, you had Naholo really high. Where did you have Naholo in your rankings?
I have him 5th overall.
Yeah, that's massive.
Yep.
So that's your second outside back, was it?
Well, he'd be 3rd.
Behind
Mackenzie and Folau, yeah.
Oh, pardon me, of course, Mackenzie. I almost forget. So I'll just run through the top 5 that we've got on the site. It's Mackenzie, Lions front row, Israel Folau, Milner Scudder, and oh Jesus, who have I got at number 5?
Richie Mwanga.
Thank you, Richie Mwanga. So, if you wanted to look back to Naholo, you have him. So you've got him above Milner Scudder. You've got him above Dag Combrink.
That's right. Yep. And see, this is one of these ones where it's not specifically about a value. It's actually about the original projection that I have for him is just really high. I just think he's a devastating player, and I think if you factor out injuries, which is, like I said, that's what I'm doing. I just think there's very few players, if any, like him. He's kind of what Xavier used to be. Sure.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess I wondered. I know you said you can't remove any injury factor, but do you have any concern? Set that aside for a second, but do you have any concerns with it more so than you can any other player?
No, I don't think so. And my position on his injuries has always been that this whole kind of fiasco about him coming back after some traditional medicine was exactly that. And obviously he came back before he was actually healthy, and he got surprise got hurt again. So yep. I think it's safe to say that probably the powers that be have maybe taken a look at that and said, hey, let's not go down that route again. Perhaps we'll actually, maybe recruit like a doctor or something crazy like that.
Yeah, you used the words traditional. I was more experimental. It sounds like Robin van Persie's horse placenta innings, doesn't it? Way back in the time.
Yeah.
Get those hamstrings sorted. Look, it's fair enough. Look, Naholo was 18.3 average. He just had a lot of holes in those games, but you're right. I think most of that came down to because he busted his hamstring after he'd done his leg at the same time, so I think it probably was all linked together. I just think that's a little high compared with someone who plays at 15. That's why I had Nanai where I have him, and that's why I had Ben Smith, and that's why I had later on in the 10. Who did I have there? Israel Dag.
Well, let me put it this way, and I suppose we could go around in circles talking about this, but he's got almost exactly the same points per minute as Ryan Kumbrick did, and I've got Naholo 5 and Kumbrick 6. So,
okay.
And
so
honestly, there's a massive difference in the number of minutes they actually played. But unlike a lot of players, I don't think that points per minute is in any way an outlier. I think if he played more minutes, he'd just score the same number of points, if not more. And yet, you've got Combrink and, what are we talking about? Naholo.
Yep.
Miles apart, like 20 picks apart. And I've got them one apart. So, hey.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think your point is okay in that respect, in that the points per minute is okay. In this case, sometimes points per minute can be a bit misleading because that player plays on the bench anyway.
I agree.
Doesn't get in.
Yeah.
But in this case, that's not the case. These are starting, international wingers.
Mm-hmm.
I still, and maybe it's back to my fullback bias, the 15 bias. I looked at just some averages, and I didn't have that kind of comparative, and I did kind of factor in a little bit of injury history with him. Let's move on. One player that actually we both had another one, quite a big difference, was Dane Haylett-Petty. Where did you have him ranked?
He ended up 28. Now, I'd say one thing I would point out is that these are still a little bit in flux, I guess. I did take a little bit away from the mock draft that we had around, and one thing to say about doing that as an exercise is it does make you question some of your rankings. You'll get to a certain point and there's the player that's next on the board that is on your rankings. You're like, actually, I don't fancy this anymore. And
yeah, I had that moment a couple of times.
Yeah, I had a few players that were like that. Like, yeah, I mean, as an example, I at one point, I think when it came to sort of Seta Tamanavalu.
I was literally going to say the same thing. Go on.
And I had him ranked above Janse van Rensburg, and I kind of looked at it and I thought, do I really want to do that? And yeah, it really made me rethink.
Shit gets real when you're on the clock, doesn't it?
That's right.
It sharpens the mind about which way you want to go. You know, sometimes you watch a rugby match or a cricket match and you're not entirely sure who you want to win, but the first try or the first four or wicket,
it comes out. It comes out. Yeah.
Exactly. That I felt like that, and it was exactly at the same moment of Tamanavalu, because I went and drafted Tamanavalu because I had him highest on my board at that point, and when I was coming back, then I had Mapo. And I was at that. I should have taken another outside back or something around that point, because then I was very midfield centric. But I thought, let's just stick with best player at this early point, and then see what it pans out with. If I'd taken an OB there, I think I would have had a much like a Nanai or someone who was available. Then I'd be much happier at that point. Taylor Haylett, into the season last year.
Yeah, I think he might be one of those players that grows a little bit in stature from his experience with the national team. But I think the ranking for me was just based purely on the fact that he's been getting it done. And last season, in terms of points, he was right up there. He was 7 points away from Ben Smith. Now he would have crept up on a lot of people doing that. But and playing a relatively similar number of minutes to Ben Smith as well. But I bet he, like I said, he's just one of those people who's a little bit creeps under the radar, and because he doesn't necessarily put up the big games, but just consistently chips away and gets those points. And I think that's probably why he doesn't get the press. When I say press, I'm talking about us.
That's press. We'll take it.
Perhaps doesn't get the kudos that he deserves for being consistent.
It's interesting that you've you bring up Ben Smith there, because we've mentioned a number of times he just does look like Ben Smith Mark II, and not just in stature and look, but just everything he does as well.
And the way he plays, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It's just really good. So he actually came home pretty strongly as well, 25-point average. Now that was helped by a 53 burner, but that counts. You can't take that away, because here we are thinking Dane Haylett-Petty's a steady Eddie, and he puts up a 53. So I had him I don't think too different. I had him at 52 overall, and that, I suspect my outside backs rankings aren't too far away from where you are. It's just I have outside backs a lot lower. I found that there was there's a lot more depth in OB this season, and so that's why a lot of the players, like James Lowe, for instance, at 34, and Naivalu at 38, even Severe at 40, right? I just felt that there were a lot of really good outside backs. I mean, for crying out loud, we've got Travis Ismail and Yulingo at 81 and 82. That's pretty good. So that was why I kind of drifted him down a little bit. I still just couldn't put him ahead of those other players. But you've put him ahead of some of the other guys that are superstars, and is that because you've mentioned this in the pub to me last year, actually, is leaning a little bit more heavily towards players that you've seen do it, as opposed to the bright, shiny thing?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of an obvious one, but at the same time, we almost find now that there is no such thing as a sleeper. All of the players where you kind of think, oh, maybe I can sneak this guy under the radar, and I'm thinking of like Warwick Hallant last year. Everybody was across this, just the same way that everybody's going to be across Rico Ioane this year.
Exactly, yeah. It's exactly what I was going to bring up as well. I'll be fascinated to see his average draft position and where it goes, because he's a fashionable player. Very fashionable player to be pulling in a draft.
Average draft position, you say?
That's right.
Funny you should say that. His average draft position at the moment is about 17.
Oh, okay. That's significant. That's a 20% increase from where he's ranked.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I think it's a cool thing to do. To be honest, he probably could back that up, but it just goes to show what a name can do and what a cool young thing, compared to, say, Dane Haylett-Petty, for instance, who's miles down, I suspect. Another player that we went through quite a bit of discussion on was Reece Hodge. You were a lot higher on him than I was. Is that... Because I increased his value after having our rankings summit as well, and mainly because of there wasn't a significant amount of midfielders, like really good midfielders, and Hodge being one of them, and also being able to potentially take those long range kicks from kind of the 50, 52, 53 metre mark that we saw last season as well. I guess first question to you, where do you think Hodge will play, and do you think that matters?
I think he'll play probably, well, he'll play in the centres, I think there's any doubt about that. Within that.
Or do you think he's just going to literally turn into Sterling Mortlock?
Yeah, I am kind of thinking that. Yeah, I mean, who have we still got there? We've still got Mitch Inman. I think Tamati Allison is gone. Obviously, there's Naivalu. So,
don't know if English is going to come in, but he kept on being listed as a centre by the Rebels.
Yeah, but I don't think he played a game there that I can recall.
No.
So no, but I think for a player like him, I don't think it matters quite so much in the way that, say, it mattered for Malachi Fekitoa shifting a spot, just because his style is head down, run straight ahead sort of thing. And so if he's at 12, that's fine. It doesn't matter. He's probably going to get his hands on the ball more, if anything. Not so much about space, perhaps. And absolutely, I think, having that club in the bag to be able to take those goal kicks, and with the goal kicking situation in Melbourne being unclear, definitely I think worth a punt, and that's not even under making any kind of assumption that he'll assume the number one kicker ranks. I think it might just be that he'll chip in with a few, and that's good enough.
Yeah, that's right. That's a difference maker. Certainly at that position this year, where there's not going to be many midfielders that kick goals. Where do you have him ranked? So I've got him 45 overall, and the 12th midfielder off the board. So my top 5 midfielders are Samu Karevi, Tamanavalu, Charlie Ngatai. Sorry, I've dropped that down. These are old ones. So it's Van Rensburg, Leonard Brown, and then Mapo.
Yeah, I've got Reece Hodge as the 6th highest midfielder, and at sort of 22 overall. So yeah, big difference in overall rankings. But like I said, that's also, that one's quite a fluid one, and that it's sort of situational. There's a few players that are like that, and for instance, Kyle Godwin is one that I'm sure it'll vary wildly depending on what happens in the very first warm-up game.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So which did you have Godwin? Did you have Hodge in front of any of those players that I read out? Karevi, Tamanavalu, Rensburg, Anton Leonard-Brown, Mapo?
In front of Mapo, yeah. Okay. And Anton Leonard-Brown. You're definitely a lot higher on Leonard-Brown than I am too.
Alright, well you're on drugs with both of those. What about Ryan Crotty, Fetters?
Yeah, they're all in there, so I'll just run you through it quickly. It's Karevi, Van Rensburg, Ngatai, asterisk, Tamanavalu, Fetters, Hodge, Crotty, and then Mapo.
Okay, yep. I've got Moala in there and Esterhausen in there. I was a bit reluctant on both of those, certainly with Moala because he tailed off at the end of last season, but I think he might have been a little bit injured as well. Actually, just on that Moala point, so we saw today that Sonny Bill Williams is expected in 5 weeks, I think the report said that I read. What do you think that backline is for the Blues?
The entire backline?
Yep.
I mean, there's probably too many question marks.
Do you want me to give you a starter, what I think it'll be?
Go on then.
Pulu.
Yes.
West.
Okay.
Francis at 12.
Right.
I think Moala. Then Rico. Nanai. And then one other.
Okay, so you've got no Sonny Bill, no Rene Ranger.
No, I think Rene might pop up on the other wing,
okay.
Depending if Rico can switch around a little bit. But Sonny Bill, if Sonny Bill's fit, I think he may go to 13 and maybe Moala switches out. I'm not too sure. I know that what worked well last season for the Blues was having that Piers Francis at 12 and West. They seemed to click in that last kind of half dozen games.
Mm-hmm.
I think he likes that idea, so I'm not sure he's going to get a chance to. Maybe it's going to be very hard to ignore having Sonny Bill and Moala at 12 and 13. I mean, that's a bit of a dream, really, when you consider
Absolutely.
it. But I think Francis provides that balance for the team in a bit more direction. Certainly, when West has a bit of an off day, he picks up the slack.
But at the same time, I think there's probably games where Moala might get benched. And that's
totally.
and that's my concern and why I actually don't have him ranked particularly high.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that I've ranked him fairly high, mainly because of the season before, not because of this particular season. I think that was the outlier, was last season's effort. I think the Blues will be a better team. I think Pulu will be better for that team. And I think Moala could well be a byproduct of that. So you briefly touched on him before. Someone that I guess could go one of two ways depending on what position you kind of hold of this person. Kyle Godwin. I know you and I were quite separated in our rankings. What was your theory? What was your thought on Kyle?
Well, I think the separation is probably pretty obvious, is that I think that he looks like he could potentially be the goal kicker, and that's why I've ranked him as such, and you haven't. So I don't think there's anything too special about the difference there. I mean, I would have thought that one's relatively straightforward, and it's not something that we're actually going to be able to resolve until sometime hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, I think there is. I think it is primarily around kicking. I think there is a small element to. I suspect you're having a look at his form from the Northern Hemisphere tour, and I'm looking a bit more of the Western Force versus kind of Brumbies and how they're going to cope this year as well. So you think that as of today that Kyle Godwin is a good enough bet to be ranked high enough to at least have a chance at taking goals?
Well, I'm ranking him as if he's a number 2 midfielder, for instance.
Right.
Well, hopefully. I mean, I know, for instance, the mock draft, he ended up as my number 2 midfielder, and I think that's pretty good.
Yep.
I think that with the potential, but once again, this is just all about potential, and this is a situation in which we're sort of commenting on blindly, which is something that we tend to do anyway. So I suppose that's no different from usual, really. But it's also one that we could just talk around in circles. But until there's some clarity, I don't think there's really much to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think my personal view as of the 2nd of February 2007 is that Wharenui Harawe will be the goal kicker and the fly half, but as you said, that's not much to be based on. It's only a good season in Southland, they brought him in, and I suspect he may have an edge over Nicholas Juiced for that 10 spot. But, as you're saying, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge, and I just saw the team that was named for the Brumbies had Wharenui at 10 and Godwin at 12, so we're no clearer there. We'll find out on Saturday. Another one is Sefa Naivalu. I was a little bit surprised that you had him as low. Is this based on your projection on him, or just position on where you would be compared to other positions?
It's actually mainly about projection. I think that after obviously a barnstorming kind of first season, that perhaps he's a little bit overrated, a little bit of, I wouldn't say perhaps one-trick pony is a little bit unfair, just in the sense that he's scored a lot of long-range tries, and the games where he did score points, like, he was really, really heavily involved, almost like freakishly heavily involved, in the sense that the ball just seemed to constantly go his way. But in between times, he doesn't look like a special player to me.
Sure. No, that's fair, and it probably matches his points output as well. So he had wild fluctuations last year. He had two 30-point games and a few 20 points, but then he had a 0.6, a 1, a minus 4.8. For me, I choose a little bit more sunny side up. I think if that Rebels team clicked, Jackson Garden-Bishop at 10, and he stayed injury-free, he could potentially be right up there in the kind of top 5 outside backs. I think for all the kind of upside he's got. Now there is downside to that as well, as evidenced by his 0.6 as ones and his minus 4.8 in your final, which was wonderful to see. But that's why I'd ranked him. I had him there just because I thought of the upside for him, and compared to Dane Haylett-Petty, who is going to just put you nice solid points, Naivalu could win you a game week with a 35er.
Okay, and then if someone's prepared to go and take him as their number one outside back, have at it. For me, he's not near that range.
Sure. And would he be a number one based on where he is at the moment, where I've ranked him? He's in the 3rd, 4th round. Yeah. So I think you can probably, if he's your number 2 based on my rankings, if you're looking at something like a fly half, outside back, midfield, he might be your second outside back. I think I'll be pretty happy with him there.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, sure.
Yep. You mentioned it also before, Anton Leonard-Brown. You're not alone on this island. I've heard this before. Are we overvaluing how well he played for the All Blacks?
Well, that's almost entirely, I think, what this is based on, isn't it? Because it's not based on any strong output for the Chiefs. It was okay. He was fine. Didn't look like a fantasy superstar based on last year's super season. So where is it coming from if it's not that All Black performance?
He did come home okay. So he did average 15 points, 15.1 for the last 5 games. But yeah, you're right. Between then and there's a lot of barren stretches of, well, just no games at all. And certainly a couple of 1.8s and 2.6s in there. So I may be a little bit blinded by him. We've both actually really liked the way that he played and thought it was a matter of time before he progressed to the next level. A little bit surprised it was this quick. So I may be blinded on that, but I know that you're not alone by the idea of him being up there. But with Seta Tamanavalu leaving as well, and potentially with Charlie Ngatai, I don't know, whatever's going on with him, he may be asked to do a lot more of the duties and playing 90 minutes. Don't know. He's a kid that's got a lot of ticker, and he goes for 90 minutes, and he didn't really get that chance last year with the Chiefs.
Wow, that is ticker. So 10 minutes after the game's finished, he's still going. That is commitment. So someone just needs him just to calm the hell down. He's just tackling guys in the changing rooms.
He's doing shuttles with the bench.
Yeah.
That's why we like him. Stepping away just from a couple of... I wanted to go back to your hatred of fly halves again and dig a little bit deeper into that and try and figure out, is this kind of slide away from fly halves in terms of where you get value and when you generally see them pop up on your team based on Nicolas Sanchez being available around that 6th round, or are you happy for that next tier to be your fly half, the Piers Francis, Dupree, Jono Lance, those types of players, Eli West?
I think in some ways it is predicated on somebody like Sanchez being available probably 6th round or more. So if I get to that point, I'm probably going to perhaps jump ahead of where I have him ranked and take him a little bit earlier than what the rankings would suggest. Mm-hmm. But even in the 6th or 7th round, 5th or 6th, you're still well away from where everyone else is going. And if you're asking me what would happen if Sanchez wasn't there, then yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to move on to the Piers Francis, Pat West combo, mm-hmm. Which has been, points wise, the Auckland fly half position has been fine. Mm-hmm. It would be perfectly serviceable from a fantasy point of view. So no, I'm not concerned about that. That's probably where I'm looking to take a fly half though, is probably 6th round, and obviously depending on who's there, could even be later.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. I was just looking through our mock draft and how it happened, and the 9th fly half off the board was Aaron Cruden at 25, and then there was a big gap to Sanchez, and I looked at that and I wondered how much it kind of weighted your thinking into leaning that way, because Sanchez, for all of his number 2-ness last year that we put him up there in the rankings, he actually averaged pretty well at the end. He scored a lot of points, and he actually won you a couple of game weeks as well. He probably killed you at the start a little bit, but he came home pretty strong and he had an average of something like 19 points. So I would love that as my number 6. I just couldn't guarantee it, because I think there probably is going to be someone else taking a second fly half at some stage between rounds 3 and 6, for instance. And I guess that's to your point, saying that you're going to try and get it around earlier than people expect you to do it.
Well, the stats actually don't back that up. From what I can see, generally it's not until the 7th round and later that people go for that second fly half. So most people try to stack their team in those key positions, obviously all the backline positions, mm-hmm. not the lock and etc. Yep. And in the second, probably the second loose ball. But that's what the stats say, that's when people start looking towards the second fly half. So really what I'm thinking is I just need to be before that. And if you have a bailout option, that's fine. I mean, it could be the likes of Robert Dupree. I'm actually okay with those as well, because what I'm saying is that based on value, those guys, they can still cut it in those late rounds.
So are you going to take 2 fly halves roughly within 3 or 4 rounds?
Sure, I could easily end up with 3 or 4 towards the end there, because you get to a cutoff point there where it's very speculative. And let me. It'd be interesting actually to see if you look through your rankings where you get to the kind of the point, where you really just don't care about the players that you're actually looking at. I think my kind of don't care point is around the 100 mark. So at 102, I've got Clayton Blommerkeys, mm-hmm. and then after that, Azir Kazim. And then you're into the sort of Yanis Kirstens and some of these other guys and Raymond Rule, for instance. By that point, I just don't care. You know what I'm saying? Yep. I mean, it's not when I say I don't care. I mean, it's like if one of these guys, if someone gets in ahead of me and takes one of these guys, it's fine. I'll take the next cab off the rank, because I don't think there's a lot of difference between them. Yeah,
that's right. It gets to a certain point where you're starting to pick some big upside players, and then all of a sudden, if you see your team is stacked full of hitting hopes, you probably start getting a few fetches that'll get you kind of 5 to 10 points, just so that you can have something on your bench to back up these guys if they all fail. So going back to, if you are taking a fly half a little bit later, and I think that's kind of what you're suggesting, that you might want to back it up with someone else that is of a similar ilk, just in case that first one pays out. Is that roughly what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the flip side of that is if you take a fly half early, if you took Mwanga and Barrett, I personally don't think I'll be carrying a backup fly half unless all of the fly halves are going to be owned. All like 20 odd that you need to be owned. So everyone has a backup. Because I think like the bottom 4 or 5 are going to be all of a rough kind of, Yum, Tamura, all of those Jackson Garden Bishop, those fly halves that are down the back anywhere between kind of 16 through kind of 23 will probably be available, and there'll be another fly half that pops up that plays out of position or fills in for an injured person. And my strategy on that point would be make sure that you have, just like you have tiers, just make sure you have 3 or 2 fly halves, and if it gets down to 1, that's when you probably need to roster that last one, because you don't want to be in a situation where you need to cover a bye or an injury. But I think if you are drafting early, make sure that you've got that backup, but I wouldn't necessarily hold it on my bench, and I would allocate the bench spot to someone else, like an outside back or someone that you can roll the dice a little bit with.
And that's fine, but it will just be a lottery ticket player.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. No, that's right. So if we look at some of the kind of, let me throw a couple of comparisons at you. And these may be fair and they may not be fair, so sing out if you don't think that they're representative of what sides of the fence we're both on. So Yako Creel and Ihai West versus Andre Pollard and Saveo Sinatla.
This is in what sense?
In that, which 2 would you have in your team preference? I'm just trying to swap around a fly half from where the other person is taken. So Yako's taken in the 2nd round, Pollard's taken in the 2nd round, Ihai was taken in the 6th round, Sinatla was taken in the 6th round.
Sure. All right, just give me a second here.
And let me make it a little bit easier, because it's not very fair comparing across Yako and Sinatla. Let's say Bernard Foley and Matt Todd and Yako Creel and Ihai West.
Okay, yeah. So if we're talking about projections here, and what I've got is the West Creel combo somewhere around 415 points, and the Foley Todd combo somewhere around 350. Okay. So in that sense, there's obviously a clear favoritism towards Creel West.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right. What about Tamanavalu and Piers Francis and Lima Sapawanga and Damien Delende?
Okay, so Tamanavalu Francis combo will be netting you 400 according to this, and Sapawanga and Delende probably closer to 5.
Okay. All right.
So I think I'm
a rating of Damien Delende, is it?
It is, yeah. I am probably a little bit higher on him. I think it might be higher on him than I actually should be, because I know that he was one of the guys that when he came up in the mock draft, he sat there for a long time.
He did.
He was the top player at the top of the draft board for several rounds, and I think it was just indicative of the fact that people are just a little bit wary of him. Yep. And even at the end, I know when we sort of went through and with some of the other guys who were participating, we went through and rated the teams, and a lot of people were very keen on the team. I believe it was shout out to Blair Jackson, his team, because it had Delende and Jesse Creel at the centre. And I was looking at that and going, I don't know if I trust either of those guys. and that's why I think the name value caught people's eye. Yep. But actually, I sort of had misgivings.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'll get to Jesse in a little bit, but I don't know if it was just the Springboks effort last year, but Damien Delende looked just like he was carrying a little bit of weight, or didn't look like the dynamic player he was. And maybe it was the injury that he picked up in Japan.
Now, here's the thing, though, about the exercise that we just did, is that if you own West and Francis, I had them both. So I had Francis, for instance, a lot lower than he was in terms of projection than last year, and definitely the year before, because I can't split what I think is going to happen between West and Francis. So adding the numbers together doesn't make sense for these two guys, because one of them is going to be a lot better.
Absolutely.
I just don't know who it is, and that's why I own both. And so that's why doing that exercise is actually not that relevant right now.
No, and especially because of the uncertainty about Sonny Bill Williams, I don't think you'll be able to get both of those players either, because I think they're going to be roughly. I think West is probably inclined to go a little bit higher, but we don't really know who's taking that 10 spot. I think I saw an article today that said that Umaga wanted to have West as the first shot at it. But, I mean, if you ever look at the Blues fixtures for the first 5 games, they're pretty brutal. Aside from that marquee matchup to open the Sanzar Super Rugby tournament away at Melbourne, which just, by the way, just beggars belief. They've got like the Crusaders and Chiefs away, and then a home game against the Highlanders in like the top 4. So I suspect that team may not be travelling very well when it comes to Sonny Bill Williams coming back, and a few heads might roll if that's the case. Don't know. Looking into the tea leaves a bit too much there.
Can I just say though, like looking forward to some Thursday night rugby though. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that's banging.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. My wife isn't so much, but yeah, I am. Absolutely. I haven't informed her yet that it's happening. Okay, so I wanted to make one more point about that fly half, a little bit later, and being able to kind of look around that 6-7 range mark, is that you can see this unfolding. You can see that this type of thing is going to happen in a lot of drafts, that people have this idea that, and it's not a very prevalent idea, I would have to say. I think most drafters naturally want to go with that fly half from the outside, but they want to get that big name player, lock that down. They think it's a key cornerstone to your fantasy rugby draft team. The ones that don't, though, are liable to be the ones that are the very, the very, I want to say clever or kind of, expert level, are trying these type strategies. Those are the ones that you want to challenge. So seeing that's happening and picking up a fly half a little bit earlier than you probably would, that second fly half, than you probably ordinary, and putting him in a spot, then that's probably what you can see if you can do as well. I know in my Aviva fantasy, I had Owen Farrell. I drafted him in the first round, and I didn't think anyone would take Ellis Lazowski at that time. Was not really someone that people were too worried about. I think his average draft division was in the 10th round. But someone didn't really know what they were doing, and they drafted him in the second, and my season was done. Because I couldn't back up Owen Farrell, and I couldn't get a trade off him because he wasn't an active manager. That was just dead, and there was no other fly halves around. So just a word to kind of make sure that you're attentive during your drafts, and it's really difficult because you've got enough of your own stuff going on, right? You're trying to figure out your next pick and what you need for your team and the best way forward, let alone having a look at everyone else's strategy. But if you can get your head up, good players say they make time look slow. They slow everything down. If you can get your head up and look at other people's teams and see what positions they need and players they need at certain points, you may be able to find gold dust, not necessarily in the draft itself, but down the line when you need to engineer a trade. Let's go into another couple of players. So Hugh Jones, who I'm legally obliged by the sponsors to discuss on every podcast after his effort beating you last year. You've got him a lot lower. Just don't believe it? Not going to force his way into the Stormers midfield?
Why would anybody believe it, really? I mean, I'm actually a little bit surprised we're even talking about him, to be honest. I think it's probably talking about him more because of what happened in the actual player. I can't help but feel.
No, I think it was a freakish thing that happened. I think he does have value, though, somewhere. I don't think he's going to get ahead of De Jong and Delende. But there's a chance he may go on the wing, and I don't know if Sinatla and Zass are going to be there the whole time. There's also talk of Colby going away next season. I think I saw somewhere that SP Murray's come there as well. So I just thought he might go up on the wing a little bit, and he has been playing really well, and he's been playing well for Scotland as well. So that was why I ranked him a little bit. And I know you've got a black spot for him.
Well, it's more just the fact that Stormers' outside backs actually haven't been that prolific. The reason why we talk about Zass is because he was out of position and that gave him a big advantage. But other than that, and even then he sort of fell away towards the end of the season, even then somebody like Colby, who is a guaranteed starter and has been okay in the past, I bet you've got him ranked pretty low, and I bet so do I. So, I just don't think unfortunately, they're a team where outside backs actually are really part of this conversation.
Yeah, that's fair. The one kind of asterisk I'd put to that is that I am kind of ranking Sinatla quite high this season, and that's purely on talent alone. The guy's a pretty special player. We see it a lot in the Blitzbokkers, but also coming into a Stormers team, it looks a little bit better. But I guess they're all fit at the moment until they start picking up injuries. But he is someone that I know a lot of South African listeners do rank quite highly. So maybe I've swayed that in as well. He's like a very good Sergio Peterson. So yeah, that was why I kind of looked at him. But let's get into Jesse Creel though. So you were fairly high on Jesse Creel. Now I assume you've got him playing in the midfield, not at prop where he looks, or at number 8 at the moment. Have you seen the size of him? Jesus.
Yeah, but in fair, he's larger, but I'm pretty sure most of that's muscle.
He's huge, isn't he? Jesus,
yeah, he was looking pretty. He was pretty ripped though.
Oh, absolutely. No, he was shredded to pieces. He's obviously signed a good deal with some whey. Gracious me. So what do you make of that Bulls midfield? You think he's going to be in that 13 and you think Hallant goes to 15? There's no chance of Jesse Creel going back to 15?
It doesn't look that.
Not chance, because there's always a chance, but...
Yeah, no, it seems unlikely. They've obviously decided that that's the position they want him to play in, and I'm sure that'll continue going forward.
And Serpentine's the 12, do you think?
Does it matter? Honestly, I really don't think it does. He is definitely down in that kind of category. I mean, if you're starting him, something's gone wrong.
No, it was more the reflection on Jesse Creel's value of having someone like Serpentine who's either played with before, and obviously Andre Pollard coming back as well. I thought probably good things for Jesse as well. I just read a report that someone somewhere in the higher echelon of South African rugby wanted to see Creel go back and play fullback a little bit, but yeah, that may have been wishful thinking. Is there any, we've got a whole list of players here, but I'm really conscious of time. So I know you mentioned before you had a couple of questions or queries over a couple of my rankings.
It was more just about, looking through, say, 10 to 14, where you've got 5 fly halves in a row, which to me just seems lazy. It looks like you've actually just given up at one point and just gone cut paste. Can you really not split these guys? Are you telling me that you think that, say, Quade Cooper, for instance, will be as good as Sapawanga?
So I actually had Sapawanga at the top of that list and Pollard at the bottom. I actually switched quite a few of those 5 around. But it was to do with the makeup of my team as it was coming back on the bend there. I felt as though I could get that top fly half in that position. I looked at each of these individual players as well, and I found it really difficult. I don't know about you to rank Pollard and Cooper. They could be miles out of the list, or they could be really, really good as well. It depends on how well you think their injury holds up. And I know you haven't factored any injury risk. Or have you with either of these two players? Surely you must have with Quade.
No, like I said, I just don't think there's any point in doing that kind of thing.
For Quade Cooper, you've heard of him before?
Well, look, if you were factoring that in, you wouldn't have Lambie at 20 like you did. You'd have him at 200 or something. But
so I would have had Lambie probably in the top 3 fly halves if he hadn't had any injury concerns. I think his made of glassness is more so than Quade Cooper, but Quade Cooper's got that as well. So let's have a bet on that then. So what's the over-under on games started by Quade Cooper?
Well, I'd take 10.
10?
Yeah.
It seems as though to me that number should be higher. If you're not factoring any injuries into his ranking, but you only think the over-under is 10, that suggests to me that you do think there could be some injury involved, or you're concerned that there could be a number of games on.
No, I just don't take stupid bets. That's what that suggests.
Didn't we do a bit like this last year with someone?
No, I'm always going to see how much I can get away with, of course. Otherwise, what's the point?
Who was the player that we had? Was it Pollard?
Yeah, it was.
It was, wasn't it? Who went over and under?
Wasn't it the year before though?
It might have been, yeah.
Yeah, that was the year before. Yeah, but that wasn't about injury. That was actually about.
Oh, that's right.
At that point, he wasn't the starter.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, what about if we say over under 13?
But I mean, my point here is that is the reason that Quade Cooper is just behind in that group is because of injury. So you think that he's better or as good as all of them, but it's just because he's going to get injured that he's not at number 10, for instance.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, that's certainly for me that's a good example over Pollard. Yep.
All right.
I think if you could guarantee me that Cooper was going to play all of the games, then he'd be ahead of Sopoaga, Foley, and Yankees anyway. I just can't see it. The one name on that list of someone who could be the top fly-off, could be the top point scorer if staying fit and play well, is Andre Pollard.
If you think that Cooper is going to get injured, is basically what you're telling me, why would you not wait and take Nicolas Sanchez maybe a couple of rounds later?
Because I think there's upside there. I think if he does actually play games and he stays fit, then he could potentially be, as I say, in that kind of number 10 spot in the third fly half. I think he could be really good.
Sure, but that's where this gets ridiculous because we're trying to predict injury. I mean, like, are we predicting his chance of getting injured? What the severity of the injury is?
Oh no, I know.
It just makes no sense to me.
But it is quite. Look, I generally don't do this unless it's Patrick Lambie or Quade Cooper. Those are the two that we usually look at, and we'll get to Tim Nanai-Williams in a minute. Okay, no, that's fair. Is there anything? What else you got?
No, like I said, I think
I couldn't split them as the answer. Some of it was I didn't really know how to go about them with so many kind of question marks in there. And then when I was going through the rankings and when I was actually doing mock drafts, depending on what spot I was in, I preferred to take that, and my team looked a little bit better than taking a first or a second midfielder and a first loose forward.
Okay. I mean, in fairness, outside of, I guess, the kind of theoretical side of things, our rankings are not a million miles different. And I think you've probably picked out a few of those players already. There's differences, but there's guys that are sort of interesting, and it's like Rico, not Digby Ioane, for instance. Yep. I think I'm a little higher on him than you are, but I can understand why. We haven't seen him for a while. We don't know. So, there's obviously it's a lot of speculation going on there. And so when I look at that, I guess I wouldn't necessarily question your ranking because I can understand it.
Yeah,
I've just taken a different approach. So it's not like I'm looking at, especially when you look through the first sort of 30 or so, there's nothing crazy in there. It's the usual suspects in terms of names. We're talking about the same players.
Yep. Interesting one you brought up about Digby Ioane. A little bit of a teaser for Kuchitown's article coming up because he's got a bit of a view on him as well, one way or t'other. He spent a lot of time in the Northern Hemisphere. He lives in the Northern Hemisphere, so he's been keeping an eye on Digby for Crusaders supporters. But there's a couple of... So I thought one of your more salient points at the rankings was around the New South Wales wingers. I was quite low on them, and to be honest, I'm still pretty low on Reece Robinson. If you look at that list, you're not going to find his name on it. So clearly I'm pretty low on him. But I think you might have value there because we don't have Naiyaravaro around that 100 mark, right?
Mm-hmm.
He could be the player that we were hoping him to be, or he could be the guy that gets sent off all the time and falls foul of this new international directive of lowering the tackle zone.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we did sort of talk a little bit about them, and it seems that there's maybe a clearer path than there has been in the past. Another guy that I quite fancy this year is Laumapi. I think having had that season to get back into Union and seen some of the stuff he was doing when he was playing for Manawatu, I think there's a chance he could kick on here.
Yep, I ranked Laumapi as starting 12 and Proctor at 13. Is that kind of how you see it? I know there's been a bit of talk on the Hall of Fame group from Ed Pye and a few other folks about Geordie Barrett. Do you think he's going to have to bide his time, or do you think he goes straight in there?
Geordie?
Yeah.
No, I think Geordie will probably have to wait.
So do I. That's kind of my view. He seems like a bit of an old school coach, Chris Boyd.
Yeah. And I don't know if necessarily having Geordie in there will suit the way that they want to play. Having they're probably a bit more kind of an action sort of team, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. I'm not crazy about Geordie. I think all the talk about it is kind of a bit premature, and people sort of saying, oh, well, we'll put him in there, the sort of some sort of expectation that he's going to kick goals, and I don't really understand where that would come from.
Yep. No, I agree as well. Even if they were in the starting lineup together, I'd be surprised if he did take over the goal kicking, certainly before a Lions series.
No, it wouldn't make any sense at all.
I think he'd be getting a phone call pretty quickly from the powers that be. What are you doing?
He'd also be getting the cold shoulder at family dinners and
that's right.
Probably a few Chinese burns and willies and all that kind of stuff brothers probably do to each other.
Yeah, those Taranaki boys. Who knows what they get up to in the back paddock. One of the players that when we were going through our rankings of our locks, because we generally don't really talk too much about locks, and what we try and find is someone that actually plays out of position, right?
Indeed.
So, from what we can gather, there's one player in my mind anyway. It's Lapeti Tamani. So he's listed as a lock this year, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be playing 8 for the Rebels. Do you see that too? He's
probably somebody that has got a lot of airtime for someone that's not really done a hell of a lot. I think he kind of caught the eye early on. Last season he was rubbish, I think it's fair to say. Sure, there's a chance he might play out of position, but I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, I guess the thing is that if you're taking a lock, and there's a strong chance that I won't, because I think maybe some of the other, the top locks will be gone by the time I get to the point where I'll be willing to take them. If he's floating around at the end, yeah, maybe I'll take him, but I'm not that phased at this point. I don't think, he's definitely not Jed Holloway, let's be clear.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. Okay, is there any other players you wanted to talk? I mean, we could go on for hours. I've got a whole nother list here, but maybe we'll just spread it out over the next few podcasts and we'll have a chat about different points.
Yeah, I got the impression with Tamani, it was like if he carried the ball 10 times, it might equal a metre.
Sure.
He just seemed to grind away.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay. A quick reminder how you can get in touch with us. So follow us on Twitter at FantasyRugDraft, or drop us an email at support@fantasyrugbydraft.com. We also talked about the Hall of Fame group as well. So on Facebook, that's a really good group to get into. A lot of folks are setting up mock drafts as well. Mossman and I have been in one. We've been in a couple. We've talked about them as well. It's a great place to go and just pop one up if you want to test a couple of your theories, see what your team looks like. And you don't have to, you just give us a call later or drop us a note and we can get rid of the league after it's done. That's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. He's Nathan Mossman.
That's news to me.
LT Repeater.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support.